The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves as I stood before the mahogany door of 124-7 Elmwood Drive, my fingers trembling around the yellowed envelope that had changed everything. 25 years old, and I felt like that 10-year-old girl again, small, forgotten, invisible. The letter in my hands, discovered among my late grandmother's belongings, bore my mother's elegant script. My dearest Emily, Mommy had to go away to make a better life for both of us. One day, when you're older, you'll understand. 15 years of understanding had only bred more questions. The suburbs of Chicago stretched endlessly around me, a testament to the American dream my mother had chased when she left me behind. Perfectly manicured lawns, luxury cars gleaming in driveways, and the weight of prosperity that seemed to suffocate rather than liberate. This neighborhood was a universe away from the cramped orphanage dormitories where I'd learned that love was earned, not given. I pressed the doorbell, its melodic chime echoing through what I imagined was a grand foyer. My reflection in the polished brass nameplate showed a woman weathered by years of working double shifts as a social worker, helping other abandoned children find their way home. The irony wasn't lost on me. The door swung open, and time collapsed into a single, breathless moment. "Can I help you?" The voice was familiar, yet foreign, aged by years I hadn't witnessed. My mother stood there in silk pajamas that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her once familiar face now lifted and perfected by cosmetic procedures. But her eyes, those green eyes I remembered kissing me goodnight, stared at me with the blankness of a stranger. "Mom?" I whispered, the word falling like a stone into still water. "It's me. It's Emily." Her face drained of color, and for a moment I saw the woman who used to braid my hair before school. Then the moment shattered. "Emily? My Emily?" She stepped backward, one manicured hand flying to her throat. "What are you doing here?" Not, "I've missed you," not, "I've thought about you every day," just the bewildered question of someone discovering an uncomfortable relic from their past. "I found this," I said, holding up the letter. "Grandma Rose kept it all these years." A shadow crossed the doorway behind her. "Mom? Who's at the door?" The voice belonged to a young man, tall, confident, wearing clothes that screamed Ivy League privilege. This had to be Marcus, 20 years old now, the stepson she'd chosen to raise while abandoning her own flesh and blood. "It's no one important," she started to say, but I stepped forward. "I'm Emily, her daughter." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's face hardened with an expression I'd seen too often, the look of someone protecting their territory. Behind him appeared a girl with platinum blonde hair and designer everything, her lips curled in barely concealed disgust as she took in my thrift store clothes and scuffed shoes. "Your daughter?" The girl, Stephanie, my replacement sister, laughed. "Mom, you never mentioned having another daughter." The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its mark in the tender places of my heart that had never quite healed. I watched my mother's face cycle through emotions, shame, fear, calculation, before settling on a brittle smile. "Why don't you come in?" she said finally, stepping aside with visible reluctance. "We should talk." The interior of their home was a monument to excess. Marble floors that reflected crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses, and the suffocating perfume of wealth that couldn't mask the absence of warmth. I followed them into a living room that looked like a magazine spread, every surface polished to perfection, every ornament placed with surgical precision. "So," Marcus said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than my car, "let me guess, you've come back for money." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I felt my mother's eyes on me, watching, waiting for my response. 15 years of wondering, and this was my welcome home? "I came back for answers," I said quietly, "and maybe to see if there was still room for me in your life." Stephanie snorted, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Seriously? After all these years? How convenient that you show up just when Mom and Dad are doing so well financially." "That's not, isn't it?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice sharp with accusation. "You disappear for 15 years, and now suddenly you want to be family again? Where were you when Mom was building this life? Where were you when we needed siblings to support each other?" The hypocrisy of his words was breathtaking. Where was I? I stood up, my composure finally cracking. I was 10 years old, Marcus. I was in foster care home number 3, then number 7, then number 12. I was learning how to tie my own shoes because there was no one else to do it. I was crying myself to sleep every night, wondering what I'd done wrong to make my own mother abandon me. "Emily, please." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "No, Mom, you don't get to please me anymore." The words came out like water through a broken dam. "Do you know what it's like to watch other kids get adopted while you're passed over again and again? Do you know what it's like to age out of the system with nothing but a garbage bag of belongings and a high school diploma?" Stephanie rolled her eyes. "Oh, boo-hoo, so dramatic. Meanwhile, some of us were building real lives, getting real educations. I just got accepted to Yale, by the way, full-ride scholarship because of Mom and Dad's connections." "Congratulations," I said, and meant it, which seemed to surprise her. "I'm proud of you for achieving that. I just finished my master's degree in social work. Took me 7 years, working nights and weekends, but I did it. I help kids like me now, the ones nobody wants." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an expensive clock on the mantelpiece. My mother's face had gone very pale, and she was twisting her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. That night, they offered me their guest room, not out of love, but out of obligation. As the house settled into silence, I wandered the hallways like a ghost, studying family photographs that documented 15 years of a life I'd never been part of. Vacations to Europe, Christmas mornings around trees groaning with presents, graduation ceremonies and birthday parties, a complete family portrait with one glaring omission. In the study, I found my mother's desk drawer slightly ajar. Inside, beneath bank statements and investment reports, was a leather-bound journal. My hands shook as I opened it to an entry dated just 2 months after she'd left me. "Richard says Emily would be too much baggage for our new life together. He's right, of course. I can't expect him to take on someone else's child when he has his own. It's better this way. She'll be fine. Children are resilient. I have to focus on Marcus and Stephanie now. They're my priority. This is my chance at real happiness. Emily will understand when she's older." The words blurred as tears fell onto the page. My mother hadn't left me because she couldn't take care of me. She'd left me because I was inconvenient, because her new husband's acceptance was more valuable than her own daughter's love. The next morning brought the confrontation I'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. I found her in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for her real family with the same careful attention I remembered from my childhood mornings. "I read your journal," I said simply. The coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering against the marble floor in an explosion of porcelain and coffee. "Emily, I can explain." "Can you?" I stepped closer, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my chest. "Can you explain how you chose a man's approval over your own child's life? Can you explain how you convinced yourself I'd be fine in the system while you played house with someone else's kids? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." My voice broke, and I hated myself for the vulnerability. "I wasn't baggage, Mom. I was your daughter. I needed you." She sank into a chair, her face crumpling with what looked like genuine remorse. "I was scared, Emily. I was so scared of being alone, of being poor again. Richard offered me security, a future I'd never dreamed of, but he made it clear that it would be difficult. So you chose easy over right? I thought you'd find a good family. I thought you'd be adopted by people who could give you things I couldn't. The only thing I needed was you." Marcus appeared in the doorway. "What's going on?" "Your sister is having a breakdown," Stephanie said from behind him, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm not your sister," I said quietly. "You've made that very clear." Over the following days, the hostility only intensified. Marcus spread whispers among the neighbors that I was a con artist, here to exploit their mother's guilt. Stephanie made pointed comments about my appearance, my education, my obvious financial desperation. They painted me as a predator, circling their perfect life like a vulture. But I stayed, not for revenge, not for money, but because somewhere beneath 15 years of pain was still that 10-year-old girl who just wanted her mother to choose her. The breaking point came at a family dinner party. Surrounded by their wealthy friends, Marcus and Stephanie regaled the guests with stories of their achievements, while pointedly excluding me from every conversation. When someone asked about me, my mother introduced me as a family friend staying with them temporarily. "Actually," I said, standing up with my wine glass, cheap wine, the only kind I could afford, to contribute, "I'm her daughter, the one she abandoned 15 years ago so she could marry into this life." The silence that followed was deafening. Crystal glasses frozen halfway to lips, conversations dying mid-sentence, the soft string quartet in the corner suddenly seeming obscenely cheerful. "How dare you?" hissed, but I wasn't finished. "I don't want your money," I said, looking around the room at their horrified faces. "I don't want your things. I just wanted my mother back." But I can see now that the woman who used to sing me lullabies and make me pancakes shaped like butterflies died the day she chose this life over me. 3 days later, my mother collapsed. I was packing my meager belongings, finally ready to accept that some wounds never heal, when I heard Stephanie screaming from downstairs. I found her in the master bedroom, hovering over my mother's unconscious form, while Marcus paced frantically, phone pressed to his ear. "The ambulance is coming," he said, his earlier antagonism forgotten in the face of crisis. Mom, can you hear me?" At the hospital, we learned that she'd suffered a massive heart attack, the kind that kills without warning, that strips away all pretense and leaves only what's essential. As she lay in the ICU, machines breathing for her, monitoring her failing heart, her golden children suddenly became remarkably absent. "I can't handle this," Stephanie wept to her friends on the phone, her voice carrying down the sterile corridor. "It's too depressing. I have finals to think about." Marcus was more direct. "She's not going to make it, and I can't watch her die. It's better if I remember her the way she was." They left. Both of them. They walked away from their mother when she needed them most, the same way she had walked away from me. But I stayed. I took leave from work and moved into the uncomfortable chair beside her bed. I read to her unconscious form, held her hand, talked to her about my life, the good parts and the terrible ones. I told her about my work with foster children, about the little girl named Sophie who reminded me so much of myself, about the small apartment I'd made into a home with secondhand furniture and plants I'd grown from seeds. The nurses began to know me by name. Dr. Martinez, her cardiologist, started updating me on her condition as if I were her next of kin, which I realized with some irony I had become by default. "She needs a blood transfusion," he told me on the 7th day. "Her blood type is rare, AB negative. We're having trouble finding donors." "Test me," I said immediately. He looked skeptical. "The chances of a match." "Test me anyway." An hour later, he returned with results and a bemused expression. "It's a perfect match. How is that possible if you're not related?" "I am related," I said simply. "I'm her daughter." As they prepared me for the transfusion, I thought about the strange poetry of the moment. My blood, the blood she'd rejected, the child she'd abandoned, was now the only thing that could save her life. Marcus and Stephanie arrived just as I was being wheeled into the procedure room, my arm already connected to tubes that would carry my life into her failing body. They looked haggard, guilty, diminished somehow in their expensive clothes. "What's happening?" Marcus demanded. "Your sister is saving your mother's life," Dr. Martinez said matter-of-factly. "She's donating blood, AB negative, very rare, very lucky." I watched their faces change as the implications sank in. The sister they'd dismissed, the burden they'd resented, was giving literal life back to the woman they'd abandoned in her hour of need. The transfusion took 3 hours. As my blood flowed through tubes into her body, I felt something shifting inside me. Not weakness from the blood loss, but a strange kind of peace. Whatever happened next, I had done everything I could. I had loved her completely, even when she couldn't love me back. She woke up 2 days later. "Emily?" Her voice was paper thin, but her eyes were clear for the first time since I'd knocked on her door. "You're here." "I'm here, Mom." "The others? Where are Marcus and Stephanie?" I could have lied, could have protected them the way she'd protected them from the truth of my existence. Instead, I took her hand and told her gently. They couldn't stay. It was too hard for them. Her face crumpled with understanding. "But you stayed." I stayed. "Even after everything I did to you, even after I chose them over you, especially then," I said. "That's what love is, Mom. It stays when staying is hard." She cried then, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from 15 years of buried guilt. I climbed carefully into the hospital bed beside her and held her the way I dreamed of being held as a child, the way I'd held so many frightened kids in my work. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I was selfish and weak, and I threw away the most precious thing in my life." "I know," I said simply. "I forgave you a long time ago. I just needed you to see what you lost." Marcus and Stephanie returned the next day, shamefaced and uncertain. They'd heard about the transfusion, about my vigil, about their mother's recovery. The dynamic between us had shifted fundamentally. I was no longer the outsider seeking entry, but the daughter who had proven her worth when it mattered most. Marcus was more direct. "She's not going to make it, and I can't watch her die. It's better if I remember her the way she was." Stephanie nodded, tears making tracks through her makeup. I was horrible to you. I was threatened because deep down, I knew you were the real daughter, the one who deserved to be here. We're all her children, I said gently. There's room for all of us. The recovery was slow, measured in small victories and gradual healing. I moved into the guest room officially, not as an intruder, but as a welcomed family member. My mother and I talked for hours about the past, about my childhood in the system, about the years she'd missed. I showed her pictures of the children I worked with, told her about the nonprofit I was planning to start. I want to help, she said one evening as we sat in her garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of forgiveness. With your nonprofit, with the children, let me help you save them the way you saved me. Marcus offered to handle the legal incorporation. Apparently, his business degree was good for something. Stephanie volunteered to design promotional materials, her artistic talents finally finding a purpose beyond self-aggrandizement. 6 months later, we held the grand opening of the Emily Rose Foundation for Foster Children, named after both my grandmother and me, the two women who understood that love wasn't about perfection, but about persistence. The suburban house that had once felt like a mausoleum was now filled with laughter, with purpose, with the sound of a family learning how to be whole again. We weren't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still words that cut deeper than intended. But we were real now, authentic in our flaws and our love. My mother kept a new picture on her desk, not a perfect family portrait, but a candid shot from Thanksgiving dinner, all 4 of us laughing at something ridiculous Marcus had said. My hair was messy, Stephanie had food on her shirt, Marcus was mid-gesture with his mouth open, and my mother was doubled over with laughter. We looked exactly like what we were, a family that had broken and healed, that had learned that love isn't about being deserved, but about being given, especially when it's difficult. Standing in that same doorway where I'd first been rejected, I realized that coming home had never been about finding my place in their perfect life. It had been about creating space for imperfect love, about proving that the bonds of family are stronger than the fears that drive us apart. The abandoned child had returned, not to claim what was lost, but to show them what they'd been missing all along. In the end, we all found our way home, not to the house on Elmwood Drive, but to each other, to the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of being family. Sometimes the greatest victory is not in being chosen first, but in choosing to love anyway, until those around you remember what love looks like. Sometimes coming home means bringing home with you, creating it from nothing but hope and the stubborn insistence that everyone deserves to belong somewhere. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who forgot how to love you remember just in time to love you back.